Welcome. Good morning. And welcome to live stream worship with First Unitarian Church of Hobart, Indiana. I am Maggie Reister, and I participate in the church community by singing on our now virtual choir and serving on the worship team. Welcome. I'm so happy to see everyone. We are a theologically diverse community of Unitarian Universalists. Together, we grow spiritually, build community, and live our values in the world. Our congregation is actively in search for a minister, and we have enjoyed many virtual guests in our pulpit from across the country. Today, members of our congregation will share greetings of Native Americans. We give much appreciation to our technical crew, James Johnson, John Halstead, and Valerie Lambert, for supporting our virtual worship experience. All of you will be able to share comments, appreciation, and significant milestones in your lives during the service just by typing a message. This way we all have the chance to greet our neighbor, share joys and sorrows, and you can generously share your offering via PayPal. By the way, the link to PayPal is located in the video description on your screen. Thank you, John, for moderating this process. You can let your Facebook and Twitter friends know that you are attending worship with hashtag First Unitarian Hobart. Now let's all take a deep breath and join together in a spirit of reverence. Please join me in our chalice lighting. The words are on your screen. We gather together this hour as people of faith with joys and sorrows, gifts and needs. We light this beacon of hope, sign of our quest for truth and meaning, and celebration of the life we share together. Once, the world was perfect, and we were happy in that world. Then we took it for granted. Discontent began a small rumble in the earthly mind. Then doubt pushed through with its spiked head, and once doubt ruptured the web, all manner of demon thoughts jumped through. We destroyed the world we had been given for inspiration, for life. Each stone of jealousy, each stone of fear, greed, envy, and hatred put out the light. No one was without a stone in his or her hand. There we were, right back where we had started. We were bumping into each other in the dark, and now we had no place to live. since we didn't know how to live with each other. Then one of the stumbling ones took pity on another and shared a blanket. A spark of kindness made a light. The light made an opening in the darkness. Everyone worked together to make a ladder. A wind clan person climbed out first into the next world, and then the other clans, the children of those clans, their children, and their children, all the way through time to now, into this morning light to you. Please join me in singing hymn number 366, Hallelujah. The words are on your screen. Please join me in the affirmation of faith. You see the words on your screen. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament. Service is its prayer. And this is our covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. You will now be unmuted. We have a chance to say a collective good morning to all our friends and guests. Good morning.
Good morning, everybody.
Glad everybody's
Good
here.
morning.
Good morning.
Happy
Sunday.
Good morning,
Happy
everyone.
Sunday.
Hola,
Beautiful day.
From all that dwell below the skies, let songs of hope and praise arise. Let peace, goodwill, all let be sung. Through every land and every tongue. Amen.
While the music plays, you can type in the chat box any joys or concerns, life milestones that you would like to share. Your joys and sorrows will not be part of the recording, which is made public.
The story for all ages this week is Stolen Words by Melanie Florence. She came home from school today, skipping and dancing, humming a song under her breath, clutching a dream catcher she made from odds and ends, bits of string, plastic beads, and brightly colored feathers. Swaying with her is her black raven's hair. Grandpa, she asked, clutching his hand, how do you say grandfather in Cree? He stopped breathing for a moment, a lifetime to a 7-year-old. He looked down at her sadly. I don't remember. I lost my words a long time ago. A frown clouded her face. How do you lose words, Grandpa? They took them away, he answered. She thought for a moment. Where did they take them? Where they took all of us. Away from home, away from laughter and soft words, away from our mothers who cried for us. She reached for his snarled hand. Who took you away, Grandpa? Men and women dressed in black, talking to us with words we did not know. They reached home and sat on the stairs together. Where did they take you, Grandpa? Away to a school that was cold and lonely, where angry white faces raised their voices and their hands when we used our words. They took our words and locked them away, punished us until we forgot them, until we sounded just like them. Harsh, sharp words, so different from the sound of our beautiful ones. She touched his weathered face, tried to wipe the sadness away with her soft hands. She looked down at her lap and handed him the dream catcher that she had made for her room. You take this, Grandpa. Maybe it'll help you find your words again. He smiled at her, his granddaughter, and touched her innocent face, a face that had known no hard words or raised hands. He smiled and kissed her head. The next day, she skipped out of school again, smiling widely at her grandfather. She stopped in front of him and took a breath. Tanisi Nemosum, she said. His eyes widened. She smiled brighter than the sun. I found your words, Grandpa. She pulled a tattered, well-worn paperback out of her book bag. Introduction to Cree, it said. My teacher helped me find this for you at the library. He reached for it, his hand shaking. He opened it, feeling the soft pages under his fingers. Nosisum, he whispered, granddaughter. The word felt familiar in his mouth. It felt like his home, his mother. He turned the pages of the book carefully. He turned another and another, word after word, his words, pages and pages of them. He looked at his granddaughter, his Nosisum. Thank you, Takini, he said. Will you read to me, she said. Will you teach me your words? Her heart danced as he nodded, holding the book against his chest. Thank you.
The service today is perhaps a bit different from the usual service. Except for these words, the words I am reading now, all of the readings are the words of people of indigenous ancestry. Many members of our congregation devoted some time over the past year in the reading and discussion of the 2019-2020 Common Read, An Indigenous Peoples History of the United States. It was a fascinating and eye-opening experience in exposing us to a broader and deeper understanding of the history of this country, an understanding which is often overlooked and even suppressed in the desire to whitewash the history lessons taught in our schools. Much like Howard Zinn's People's History of the United States, this book shines a bright light into the corners we have long left in darkness. In addition, it reminds us of the inherent connection between the rights of Indigenous people in this country and the world over, and the need to fight for environmental justice. So let us journey through these documents of testimony and entreaty, poetry and prose, and begin by heeding these words of Philip Deer, a poet of Akwesasne Mohawk ancestry. It's called How It Came to Be. Only the Indian people are the original people of America. Our roots are buried deep in the soils of America. We are the only people who have continued with the oldest beliefs in this country. We are the peoples who still speak the languages given to us by the Creator. This is our homeland. We came from no other country. We have always looked at ourselves as human beings. Every tribe has a trail of tears. We wonder when it is going to end. Thank you.
This reading is from Samuel Drake's Biography and History of the Indians of North America. It's in the form of a letter from Powhatan, who was the chief of a confederation of Indians on the East Coast, written in the very early 1600s to Captain John Smith. I am now grown old and must soon die, and the succession must descend in order to my brothers and then to my sisters and daughters. I wish their experience was equal to mine, and that your love to us might not be less than ours to you. Why should you take by force that from us which you can have by love? Why should you destroy us why should you destroy us who provided you with food? What can you get by war? We can hide our provisions and fly into the woods, and then you must consequently famish by wronging your friends. What is the cause of your jealousy? You see us unarmed and willing to supply your wants if you will come in a friendly manner, and not with swords and guns as to invade an enemy. I am not so simple as not to know it is better to eat good meat, lie well, and sleep quietly with my women and children, to laugh and be merry with the English, and being their friend, to have copper, hatchets, and whatever else I want, than to fly from all, to lie cold in the woods, feed upon acorns, roots, and such trash, and to be so hunted that I cannot rest, eat, or sleep. In such circumstances, my men must watch, and if a twig should but break, all will cry out, "Here comes Captain Smith," and so in this miserable manner to end my miserable life. And, Captain Smith, this might be soon your fate too, through your rashness and unadvisedness. I therefore exhort you to peaceable counsels, and above all, I insist that the guns and swords, the cause of all our jealousy and uneasiness, be removed and sent away.
This is a letter from Sarah Winnemucca, an educated Paiute woman, printed as an appendix to Helen Hunt Jackson's 1881 book, chronicling the injustice done to Native Americans, and of which Miss Jackson sent a copy at her own expense to each and every member of Congress. To Major H. Douglas, U.S. Army. Sir, I learned from the commanding officer at this point that you desire full information in regard to the Indians around this place, with a view, if possible, of bettering their condition by sending them on the True Key River Reservation. All Indians from here are Carson City belong to the Paiute tribe. My father, whose name is Winnemucca, is the head chief of the whole tribe, but he is now getting too old and has not energy enough to command nor impress on their minds the necessity of their being sent to the reservation. In fact, I think he is entirely opposed to it. He, myself, and most of the Humboldt and Queens River Indians were on the True Key Reservation at one time. But if we had stayed there, it would be only to starve. I think that if they had received what they were entitled to from the agents, they would never have left them. So far, their knowledge of agriculture extends. They are quite ignorant, as they would have never had the opportunity of learning. But I think if proper pains were taken, that they would willingly make the effort to maintain themselves by their own labor, providing they could be made to believe that the products were their own, for their own use and comfort. It is needless for me to enter into details as to how they were treated on the reservation while there. It is enough to say that they were confined to the reserve and had to live on what fish they might be able to catch in the river. This is the kind of civilization awaiting us on the reserves. God grant that we may never be compelled to go on one, as it is much preferable to live on the mountains and drag out an existence in our native manner, so far as living is concerned, and the Indians at all military posts get enough to eat and considerable cast-off clothing. But how long is this to continue? What is the object of the government in regards to the Indians? It is enough that we are at peace. Remove all the Indians from the military posts and place them on reservations such as Truckee and Walker River reservations, as they were conducted. It will require a greater military force stationed around to keep them within the limits than now does it keep them in subjection. On the other hand, if the Indians have any guarantee that they can secure a permanent home on their own native soil, and that our white neighbors can be kept from encroaching on our rights, after having a reasonable share of ground allotted to us as our own, and giving us the required advantages of learning, I warrant that the savage, as he is called today, will be a thrifty and law-abiding member of the community 15 or 20 years hence. Sir, if any future time you should require information regarding the Indians here, I will be happy to furnish the same if I can. Sarah Winnemucca, Camp McDermott, Nevada, April 4th, 1870.
We never quarrel about religion. In this excerpt from a famous speech delivered in 1828, the Iroquois leader, Red Jacket, replies to a representative of the Boston Missionary Society named Mr. Cram. The missionary has asked for approval to spread his faith among the tribes within the Iroquois sphere of influence in the northern New York state. When the meeting was over, Cram refused to shake the Indians' outstretched hands. There could be no fellowship between the religion of God and the works of the devil, he announced. The Iroquois are reported to have smiled. Friend and brother, it was the will of the Great Spirit that we should meet together this day. He orders all things, and he has given us a fine day for our council. He has taken with his garment from before the sun and caused it to shine with brightness upon us. Our eyes are opened that we see clearly. Our ears are unstopped that we have been able to hear distinctly the words you have spoken. For all these favors, we thank the Great Spirit and him only. Brother, continue to listen. You say that you are sent to instruct us how to worship the Great Spirit agreeably to his mind. And if we do not take hold of the religion which you white people teach, we shall be unhappy hereafter. You say that you are right and we are lost. How do we know this to be true? We understand that your religion is written in a book. If it was intended for us as well as for you, why has not the Great Spirit given it to us? And not only to us, but why did he not give it to our forefathers, the knowledge of that book? With the means of understanding it rightly, we only know that you tell us about it. How shall we know when to believe, being so often deceived by the white people? Brother, you say there is but one way to worship and serve the Great Spirit. If there is but one religion, why do you white people differ so much about it? Why do not all agree, as you can all read the book? Brother, we do not understand these things. We are told that your religion was given to your forefathers and has been handed down from father to son. We also have a religion that was given to our forefathers and has been handed down to us, their children. We worship that way. It teaches us to be thankful for all the favors we receive, to love each other, and to be united. We never quarrel about religion.
This is from the work of N. Scott Momaday of Kiowa ancestry. Descending eastward, the highland meadows are a stairway to the plain. In July, the inland slope of the Rockies is luxuriant with flax and buckwheat, stonecrop, and larkspur. The earth unfolds and the limit of the land recedes. Clusters of trees and animals grazing far in the distance cause the vision to reach away and wonder to build up in the mind. The sun follows a longer course in the day, and the sky is immense beyond all comparison. The great billowing clouds that sail upon it are shadows that move upon the grain like water, dividing light Farther down in the land of the crows and blackfeet, the plain is yellow. Sweet clover takes hold of the hills and bends on itself to cover and seal the soil. There the Kiowas paused on their way. They had come to the place where they must change their lives. The sun is at home on the plains. Precisely there does it have a certain character of a god. When the Kiowas came to the land of the crows, they could see that the dark leaves of the hills at dawn across the Bighorn River, the profusion of light on the grain shelves, the oldest deity ranging after the solstices. Not yet would they veer southward to the cauldron of the land that lay below. They must wean their blood from the northern winter and hold the mountains a while longer in their view. They bore the Theme in procession to the east. A dark mist lay over the Black Hills, and the land was like iron. At the top of a ridge, I caught sight of Devil's Tower upthrust against the gray sky, as if in the birth of time, the core of the earth had broken through its crust, and the motion of the world was begun. There are things in nature that engender an awful quiet in the heart of man. Devil's Tower is one of them. 2 centuries ago, because they could not do otherwise, the Kiowas made a legend at the base of the rock. My grandmother said, 8 children were there at play, 7 sisters and their brother. Suddenly, the boy was struck dumb. He trembled and began to run upon his hands and feet. His fingers became claws, and his body was covered with fur. Directly there was a bear where the boy had been. The sisters were terrified. They ran, and the bear after them. They came to the stump of a great tree, and the tree spoke to them. It bade them climb upon it, and they did so as it began to rise into the air. The bear came to kill them, but they were just beyond its reach. It reared against the tree and scored the bark all around with its claws. The 7 sisters were born into the sky, and they became the stars of the Big Dipper. From that moment, and so long as the legend lives, the Kiowas have kinsmen in the night sky. Whatever they were in the mountain, they could be no more. However tenuous their well-being, however much they had suffered and would suffer again, they had found a way out of the wilderness.
This reading is from Dwellings, a collection of essays by Linda Hogan of Chickasaw ancestry. Stories of water. Earth is a water planet. It is a world of salt oceans, cloud forests, underground springs, and winding rivers. It has built arches and pillars, has burrowed a deepening way into caves. It has plunged into land and been lost to other places where the long, slow dripping of moisture created glittering crystals and teeth of inner earth. And as ice, it has taken the large shape of large glaciers and ridden space. The mountains where I live are young. Water still works them. With its freezing and thawing, earth gives way. Called home by gravity, slabs of stone crash heavily down to the canyon floor, and we say, the earth is alive. It shrugs the rocks off its tired shoulders. In the canyon, spring water seeps out from stone walls, and we say, earth is weeping. This canyon was created by a curling river that emptied itself into an inland sea a few miles down from here. The currents of that ancient sea lapped away at red stones, created ledges and crannies that are now the nesting places of birds. It forms stone bowls that hold what is left of every rain, pools of water reflecting the face of the moon. Lizards drink there. The same water, freezing and thawing, contracts and expands the topsoil, so the earth pushes stones upward, away from gravity. In spring, when we go outside, new stones are scattered here and there. We say, land has given birth. And it does. Everywhere water travels, life follows. In a desert, only moments after a cloudburst, the terrain quickens. A plant flowers. An insect drinks moisture from its back and survives. Frogs rise up from beneath parched earth, mate, and return again to the cool underworld. We have ceremonies to bring rain clouds to arid lands. We sing down the rain. We smell the ceremonies of life-giving rain and hear thunder announce its presence, and the gray shafts of rain arrive from the distance. Then we celebrate the mud-filled rivers, the veins and arteries of our alive world. Seeds send forth their first shoots, reservoirs fill, and through some amazing alchemy, water is transformed, flowing through wires into homes, light at the touch of a finger. Most of us cannot imagine such worlds as are nourished and created by our planet's water, but our treasures do not exist in water or across it, such as for the seafaring people. The treasure is water itself. It means life to us and survival, and while water is being exiled from the land it inhabits, it has no choice but to take up residency elsewhere. The journey of water is round, and its loss too moves in a circle, following us around the world as we lose something of such immense value that we do not even yet know its name.
This is from a speech by Oren Lyons of the Onondaga Iroquois ancestry. Columbus landed here 500 years ago. Across America and the world, there was a tremendous preparation for 1992. I know that the President of the United States set aside some $82 million for this celebration, as they call it. And Spain has spent even more than that. All of the world has become involved. The Catholic Church, for obvious reasons, Italy, the United States, as well as Latin America. Everybody is pointing to the year 1992. Why? Since 1992 is a year of assessment, where we stand back and look at 500 years of activity in the Western Hemisphere and assess what condition we are in. It can be a year of atonement for what happened to the indigenous peoples who caught the brunt of this invasion, or it can be a year of commitment to see that the next 500 years are going to be better than the last 500. This process of reflection will have to involve Indian nations. We have to make our own assessment of our condition. We have to present a position to challenge this idea of a celebration, to challenge this idea of a discovery. Discovery is a very arrogant perception. We were discovered, sort of like the flora and fauna of North America. In truth, there were free nations here with a real understanding of government and community, of the process and great principles of life. In fact, on the landfall of Christopher Columbus, freedom was rampant in North, Central, and South America. Everybody was free and living in a natural world economy where they had economic security in perpetuity. They had adjusted themselves to working with the land and understood that every year that the land renewed itself. Now, coming across the water were people with a different perception about economy. As a matter of fact, up to the present day, the governments of Canada and the United States have spent their time trying to get our people involved in this economy. They have spent a lot of time trying to tell us about the importance of private property as opposed to community property. We hear terms like development, progressive development, sustainable development. But our perception is that if you do not operate around the real laws of the universe, you are challenging fundamental cycles that you depend on for life. So there was obviously a conflict between Christopher Columbus's perception and the people that he met. All of the writing says The first peoples were happy, healthy, and well fed, and not overly inclined to warfare. Yet the process of domination began immediately. He said these would make good slaves. That was his first message back to the queen. We can make slaves of these people since they are easily subjugated and they do not know much about warfare. Any 10 of my men can take over this island with the technology and weapons we have brought over. So as we sit back and assess these last 500 years, let us look at what has happened to our people. How have the Indian nations fared? How have our children? How are our institutions? Are they holding up? How are our principles? Are they holding up? We have to look at ourselves because as these last 500 years have been, the next 500 or even 50 years are going to be tougher. When one speaks of generations the way the Indians speak of them, we must see that the next generations, those faces coming from the earth, have the same good that we have and can enjoy the same law that we do. Well, in assessing 500 years in this country, we see that the next 7 generations are not going to enjoy that. Every day, at least 6 species of life become extinct. So when you talk about the philosophy of sovereignty, you must talk of longevity and the future. This is the common sense that comes from the long experience of Indian nations being in one place. If you do not work with the laws that surround you, you will not survive. It is quite simple. We know that there is no mercy in the natural law whatsoever. It will exact retribution in direct ratio to violation. You cannot discuss this. There are no lawyers, only the retribution. The problem here is that we visit this retribution on our children and on our grandchildren. We leave them the problem of our excesses. What do we say to greedy individuals that say sovereignty is money? When we speak of sovereignty, we have to have a large conceptualization of what it is we are talking about. With Indian nations, it is not just a political term, it is also a spiritual term. It may be even be more spiritual than political. One of our people once said that spirituality is the highest form of politics. So let us keep the parameters of what we are talking about clear. The parameters are the oceans that surround us, and they are beyond our time here on Earth. The parameters we are discussing reverberate into the future. If your economy does not function within those parameters, then you are shortchanging those future generations we talked about. Maybe it is only the Indians that talk about 7th generation. I do not know. Since we have talked about it a lot, I have heard it again and again. I hear it from strangers. I hear it from strange places. Why not? It seems to us common law and common sense. So let us say that sovereign is common sense in its most basic, fundamental form. Common sense and respect for all life.
This reading is the work of Linda Hogan of the Chickasaw Heritage, All My Relations, and she's telling about her experiences at a sweat lodge. I am sent home to prepare. I tie 50 tobacco ties green. This I do with Bull Durham tobacco. Squares of cotton are tied with twine and left strung together. These are called prayer ties. I spend the time preparing alone and in silence. Each tie has a prayer in it. On a hot day, I go to the site where the ceremony is to take place. Others are already there. The children are cooling off in the creek. A woman stirs the fire that lives inside a circle of black rocks, pots beside her. In the background, the sweat lodge stands. Birds are on it. It is still skeletal. A woman and a man are beginning to place old rugs and blankets over the bent cottonwood frame. A great fire is already burning. The lava stones, that will be the source of heat for the sweat that is being fired in it. By late afternoon, we are ready, one at a time, to enter the enclosure. The hot lava stones are placed inside. They remind us of Earth's red and fiery core and the spark of life in all. After the flap, which serves as a door, is closed, water is poured over the stones and the hot steam rises around us. In a sweat lodge ceremony, the entire world is brought inside the enclosure. The soft odor of smoking cedar accompanies this arrival. It is all called in. The animals, water, wind, young lithe willow branches bend overhead remember their lives rooted to the ground. The sun their leaves took in. They remember that minerals and water rose up their trunk, and birds nested in their leaves, and that planets turned above their brief, slender lives. The thunderclouds travel in from far regions of Earth, and the wind arrives from 4 directions. It has moved through caves, and it has been breathed by the elk and the grizzly bear. It is a place grown intense and holy. It is a place of immense community and of humbled solitude. We sit together in our aloneness and we speak one at a time. We remember that all things are connected. Remembering this is the purpose of the ceremony. It is part of a healing and restoration. It is the mending of a broken connection between us and the rest. The participants in a ceremony say the words, "all my relations," before and after we pray. Those words create a relationship with other people, with animals, with the land. To have health, it is necessary to keep all these relations in mind. The intention of the ceremony is to put a person back together by restructuring the human mind. We make whole our broken off pieces of self and world. Within ourselves, we bring together the fragments of our lives in a sacred act of renewal. The ceremony is a part of return. It takes us toward the place of balance, our place in the community of all things. It is an event that sets us back upright, but it is not a finished thing. The real ceremony begins where the formal one ends, when we take up a new way, our minds and hearts filled with the vision of Earth that holds us within it, in compassionate relationship to and with our world. We speak, we sing, we swallow water, we breathe the smoke, and it's as if at the end of the ceremony, our skin contains land and birds. The places within us has become filled. As inside the enclosure of the lodge, the animals and ancestors move into their human body, into skin and blood. The land merges with us. The stones come to dwell inside the person. The black skies of night that wheel above our heads come to live inside the skull. We who easily grow apart from the world are returned to the great store of life all around us. After the sweat lodge ceremony, the enclosure is abandoned. The prayer ties are placed in nearby trees. Everything returns to ordinary use. A spider weaves a web from one of the cottonwood poles to another. Crows sit inside the framework. It's evening, and the crickets are singing. All my relations. Thank you.
Okay. Holy Rage, Lessons from Standing Rock, written by Louise Erdick, Among the Water Protectors. Am I reading or not? Well, okay. The snow-scoured hills and buttes of the Missouri Breaks are dotted with isolated houses until the sudden appearance of the Oceti-Sakowin encampment, translating as 7 council fires, on the Standing Rock Sioux Reservation. The presence of so many people catches at the heart. Snow-dusted teepees, neon pup tents, dark olive military tents, brightly painted metal campers, and round solid yurts set shelter hundreds on the floodplain where the Cannonball River meets the Missouri. Flags of native nations whip in the cutting wind, each speaking of solidarity with the Standing Rock tribe's opposition to the Dakota Access Pipeline, owned by Energy Transfer Partners and Sunoco Logistics. This pipeline would pass beneath the Missouri River and imperil drinking water, not only for the tribe, but for farmers, ranchers, and townspeople all along the river's course. On December 3rd, 2016, veterans from all over the country began to arrive at Standing Rock. Jack Dalrymple, the governor of North Dakota, and the Army Corps of Engineers had called for the camp to be cleared of protesters, who from the beginning have preferred the term water protectors. Vehicles were lined up for nearly a mile to get into the camp. It did not seem possible that many more people could fit onto the space, but somehow the camp seemed to morph to hold envoys from all over the globe. To name a few: Maori, Muslims, delegations of priests and ministers, people from more than 90 native nations, any number of Europeans, and various rock stars. The curious came, the bold, the devoted, not to mention the water Wookiee warriors whose pop-up camper had a Star Wars theme. Passionate young native people as well as seasoned elders joined the resistance camp. The arrival of veterans adept at winter survival and ready to join the fight against the pipeline was yet another influx. A small group of veterans in various patterns of camouflage gathered before their first briefing, standing in the sun outside the tiny plywood and thermal sheath headquarters at the eastern edge of Oceti-Sakowin. As we waited at the camp in warm sun, I asked veterans at what moment they had decided to meet there. Most of them talked first about online videos of riot gear-clad police using water cannons in sub-freezing weather, of masked police tear-gassing water protectors, of native people being maced as they held their hands up, and the use of attack dogs. The disturbing scenes initiated by the Morton County Police and other police units were instrumental in activating increased support for Oceti-Sakowin. Some said that they regarded maintaining a clean water supply as a homeland security issue, corporate greed as the enemy. Other veterans talk about the oath they had taken to defend their country from enemies, foreign and domestic. David Archambault, the tribal chair, who from the beginning has led the resistance to the DAPL pipeline, told the veterans, "What you are doing is precious to us. I can't describe the feeling that move over me. It is Wakan, sacred. You are all sacred." On the afternoon of December 4th, the Army Corps of Engineers made the stunning announcement that it had denied Energy Transfer Partners an easement to cross under the Missouri River. In the end, though, the veterans did take on a life-saving mission. In every way that they could, they helped secure the camp against what turned out to be a blizzard of unexpected intensity. The blizzard arrived on December 5th, and in the deep cold that followed, veterans reinforced shelters and helped maintain a spirit of cooperation that enabled the thousands of new camp members to survive their experience on Standing Rock. Besides frostbite, what did people take away from there? This was probably the first time many non-Native people had been on a reservation or in the presence of Native ceremonies. The more people understand that Native Americans have their own religious rituals and objects of veneration, which to many non-Native peoples are simply features of the landscape, as well as cathedrals and churches. Understanding the natural world as more than just a resource for energy or a recreational opportunity or even a food resource gives moral weight to the effort to contain catastrophic climate change. Imagine if Energy Transfer Partners planned to drill underneath Jerusalem. Of course, the company wouldn't consider such a route, but it would be safer than drilling beneath the Missouri River.
This reading is titled Urbanity. It comes to us from the prologue of the novel There, There by Tommy Orange of Cheyenne and Arapaho ancestry. Urban Indians were the generation born in the city. We've been moving for a long time, but the land moves with you like memory. An urban Indian belongs to the city, and cities belong to the earth. Everything here is formed in relation to every other living and non-living thing from the earth. All are relations. The process that brings anything to its current form, chemical, synthetic, technological, or otherwise, doesn't make the product not a product of the living earth. Buildings, freeways, cars, are those not of the earth? Were they shipped in from Mars, the moon? It is because their process. Is it because their process manufactured or that we handle them? Are we so different? Were we at one time not something else entirely? Homo sapiens, single-celled organisms, space dust, unidentifiable pre-bang quantum theory. Cities form in the same way as galaxies. Urban Indians feel at home walking in the shadow of a downtown building. We came to know the downtown Oakland skyline better than we did any sacred mountain range. The redwoods in Oakland Hills better than any other deep wild forest. We know the sound of the freeway better than we do rivers, the howl of distant trains better than a wolf howl. We know the smell of gas and freshly wet concrete and burned rubber better than we do the smell of cedar or sage or even fry bread, which isn't traditional, like reservations aren't traditional. But nothing is original. Everything comes from something that came before, which was once nothing. Everything is new and doomed. We ride buses, trains, and cars across, over, and under concrete plains. Being Indian has never been about returning to the land. The land is everywhere or nowhere.
Our last reading this morning comes from, from the epilogue to The Heartbeat of Wounded Knee by David Truer. David is of Ojibwe ancestry. It pains me to think about Wounded Knee. It also pains me for different reasons to read about it in books like D. Brown's. What hurts is not just that 150 people were cruelly and viciously killed. It is that their sense of life and our sense of their lives died with them. We know next to nothing about them. Who among them was funny? Who kicked his dog? Were they unfaithful or vain or fond of sweets. The tiny, fretful, intricate details are what make us who we are, and they are lost again and again when we paint over them with the tragedy of the Indian. In this sense, the victims of Wounded Knee died twice, once at the end of the gun and again at the end of a pen. We die too in our minds, and this is perhaps the saddest death of all. We are so used to telling the stories of our lives and those of our tribes as a tragedy, as a necessarily diminishing line. Once we were great, once we ruled everything, and now we rule nothing. Now we are merely ghosts that haunt the American mind, that we deprive ourselves of the very life we yearn for. I cannot shake the belief that the ways in which we tell the story of our reality shapes that reality. The manner of telling makes the world, and I worry that if we tell the story of the past as a tragedy, we consign ourselves to a tragic future. If we insist on raging against our dependency on the United States and modernity itself, we miss something vital. As much as our past was shaped by the whims and violence of an evolving America, America, in turn, has been shaped by us. The violence itself was certainly influenced by the shifting frontier of conflict between tribes and settlers. As America emerged from its adolescence in the early 1800s, the question of how the federal government would work with and against the states it united was thrown into doubt by the Indian removals from the Southeast. The modern Supreme Court was shaped by the questions of community and obligation between the government and sovereign Indian nations throughout the 1970s, 1980s, and 1990s. At Standing Rock, the water protectors have reminded us of pressing modern questions that are fundamental not only to Indian struggles, but also to our national identity. What and who is most important? To what degree does and to what degree should the government privilege private property and corporate interest over the public good? And what, after all, is the public? In order to answer these questions, I think we have to find a new way to think. Black Elk mourned that a dream died in the snow at Wounded Knee. It is up to us to do the next thing, to dream a new one. What kind of country do we want to be? Is this government of ours one that should merely get out of the way so that America can once again be, in Ronald Reagan's words, a place in which people can still get rich? Or is our government meant to be the angel, avenging or otherwise, of our better nature? It has always bothered me that the very idea of paying attention to our knowing Indian history is tinged with the soft compassion of the do-gooder as a kind of voluntary public service, like volunteering at an after-school program. But if we treat Indian stories this way, we do more than relegate Indians themselves to history, as a mattering only in relation to America's deep and sometimes dark past. We also miss the full measure of the country itself. If you want to know America, if you want to see it for what it was and what it is, you need to look at Indian history and at the Indian present. If you do, if we all do, we will see that all the issues posed at the founding of the country have persisted. How do the rights of the many relate to the rights of the few? What is or should be the furthest extent of federal power? How has the relationship between the government and the individual evolved? What are the limits of the executive to execute policy, and to what extent does that matter to us as we go about our daily lives? How do we reconcile the stated ideals of America as a country given to violent acts against communities and individuals? To what extent should it? What are the limits to the state's power over the people living within its boundaries or borders? To ignore the history of Indians in America is to miss how power itself works. John Adams, writing to Thomas Jefferson in 1816, urged him to remember that Power always thinks it has a great soul and vast views beyond the comprehension of the weak. If anything, the lives of Indians, our struggles to and success in surviving, remind us that our souls have great power. We need to recall the mute agony of the Indian woman, her name lost to history, who was abducted by Columbus, given to Michel de Cuneo, sold, traded, raped, and likely consigned to the sea. We need to remember the strength and dignity of the Oteo chief medicine horse, who responded to the federal commissioner trying to take his land in 1873 by saying, "We are not children, we are men. I never thought I would be treated so when I made the treaty." We need to remember the anguish of the Indian father who received news of his daughter's death at Flandrau Indian School in 1906. Those that were with her say she did not suffer, but passed away as one asleep. Lizzie was one of our best girls. I am very sorry that you could not have seen your daughter alive, for she had grown quite a little and improved much since you let her come here with me. To remember these stories and all the others is to remain humble in power and to be called to tend in the troubled soul of the country. It is to remember that our very lives exist at the far side of policy. It is to remember the good and the bad, the personal and the social, the large and the small. It is not to capture Indians per se, but to capture the details of our lives. We are, for better or worse, the body of our republic, and we need to listen to it, to hear, beyond the pain and anger and fear, beyond the decrees and policies and eddying of public sentiments and resentments, beyond the bombast and rhetoric, the sound, faint at times, stronger at others, of a heartbeat going on.
There. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. And a big thank you to Sandy Waters for assembling these sacred readings from Native Americans for us today, for planning the service. I neglected to mention that the opening words were by the U.S. Poet Laureate Joy Harjo of Muskogee ancestry. And now, while the music plays, please consider making a donation to help us continue our online services. You can see the link on the screen to PayPal. You can make an offering anytime after the service as well. And of course, you can mail a check directly to the church. And you can see those instructions in the chat box. Thank you. Please join me in singing our closing hymn, number 1069, Ancient Mother.
Ancient mother, I feel your laughter. Ancient mother, I taste your tears. Ancient mother, I hear you calling. Ancient mother, I hear your song. Ancient mother, I feel your laughter. Ancient mother, I taste your tears. Ancient mother, I hear you calling. Ancient mother, I hear your song. Ancient mother, I feel your laughter. Ancient mother, I taste your cheese.
Our closing words this morning are from the work of the current U.S. Poet Laureate, Joy Harjo, of Muskogee Creek ancestry. In Conflict Resolution for Holy Beings, she writes, "For any spark to make a song, it must be transformed by pressure. There must be unspeakable need, muscle of belief, and wild, unknowable elements. I am singing a song that can only be born after losing a country." This, then, is called for calling the spirit back from wandering the earth in its human feet. Put down that bag of potato chips, that white bread, that bottle of pop. Turn off that cell phone, computer, and remote control. Open the door and then close it behind you. Take a breath offered by friendly winds. They travel the earth, gathering essences of plants to clean. Give it back with gratitude. If you sing, it will give your spirit lift to fly to the stars' ears and back. Acknowledge this earth, who has cared for you since you were a dream, planting itself precisely within your parents' desire. Let your moccasin feet take you to the encampment of the guardians who have known you before time, who will be there after time. They sit before the fire that has been there without time. Let the earth stabilize your post-colonial insecure jitters. Be respectful of the small insects, birds, and animal people who accompany you. Ask their forgiveness for the harm we humans have brought down upon them. Don't worry. The heart knows the way, though there may be high rises, interstates, checkpoints, armed soldiers, massacres, wars, and those who will despise you because they despise themselves. The journey might take you a few hours, a day, a year, a few years, 100, 1,000, or even more. Watch your mind. Without training, it might run away and leave your heart for the immense human feast set by the thieves of time. Do not hold regrets. When you find your way to the circle, to the fire kept burning by the keepers of your soul, you will be welcomed. You must clean yourself with cedar, sage, or other healing plant. Cut the ties to failure and shame. Let go the pain you are holding in your mind, your shoulders, your heart, all the way to your feet. Let go the pain of your ancestors to make way for those who are heading in our direction. Ask for forgiveness. Call upon the help of those who love you. These helpers may take many forms: animal, element, bird, angel, saint, stone, or ancestor. Call your spirit back. It may be caught in corners and creases of shame, judgment, and human abuse. You must call it in a way that your spirit will want to return. Speak to it as you would to a beloved child. Welcome your spirit back from its wanderings. It may return in pieces, in tatters. Gather them together. They will be happy to be found after being lost for so long. Your spirit will need to sleep a while after it's bathed and given clean clothes. Now you can have a party. Invite everyone you know who loves and supports you. Keep room for those who have no place else to go. Make a giveaway. And remember, keep the speeches short. Then you must do this. Help the next person find their way through the dark.
The earth is our mother. We must take care of her. The earth is our mother. We must take care of her. Young, 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 young. Sacred ground we walk upon, with every step we take her. Sacred ground we walk upon, with every step we take. Our mother, she will take care of us. If earth is our mother, she will take care of us.
Now please join me in extinguishing the chalice. The words are printed on the screen. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. This concludes our service. Please consider joining us for an unmuted coffee hour, which will begin in a few moments.